Journey to the Western Vernacular. Chapter 31. Sun Wukong enters the bottomless pit 3 times. People in the city found their children and took them home happily. When Tang Monk and his disciples left, the people in the city beat gongs and drums and sent them outside the city. Tang Monk and his companions left the Bhikkhu country, got up early and went to bed late, going through spring and winter. On this day, they walked up a high mountain and entered a black pine forest. Tang Monk was hungry and asked Wukong to go to Huatsai. Wukong helped Tang Monk dismount and rest on the spot, and then he drove the clouds to transform into a fasting place. Tang Monk was chanting sutras in the forest when he suddenly heard someone shouting help. He followed the sound to a pine tree and saw a woman tied to the tree, so he asked why. The woman said that she encountered robbers while sweeping the tomb and tied her up here. Tang Monk hurriedly asked Bajie to rescue the woman. Just when Bajie was about to take action, Wukong jumped down from the air, grabbed Bajie's ear and said, "Junior brother, don't move, she is a monster." It turned out that Wukong saw a group of black air in mid-air covering the auspicious light on Master's head, and he knew. The Master met the monster and rushed back. Tang Monk stopped arguing, helped Wukong to the horse, left the woman and left. When the woman saw that Wukong had seen through it, she still refused to give up, so she blew a few words into Tang Monk's ears. "Why don't you worship the Buddha and learn the scriptures if you leave the living alive without saving it?" When Tang Monk heard this, his heart was pounding wildly, and regardless of Wukong's dissuasion, he took Bajie back to the pine tree, untied the woman from the tree, and helped her mount the horse. So, Tang Seng went in front, Bajie and Sha Seng carried the burden and led the horse behind. Wukong walked between Tang Seng and the woman, and continued westward. It was getting dark, and they came to a temple. Tang Seng asked his disciples to wait outside, and he went to stay overnight. The monks in the temple welcomed Tang Monk into the temple, invited Wukong and others in, arranged a meal and entertained them. After eating, the monk asked Tang Seng where he wanted the woman to rest. Seeing that the monk was a little suspicious, Tang Monk quickly explained the origin of the woman. So the monk sent the woman to the Heavenly King's hall to rest. Unexpectedly, Tang Monk caught a cold that night and complained of a headache when he woke up early in the morning. He had no choice but to rest here for 3 days. One evening, Tang Monk was thirsty. Wukong took a bowl to the kitchen at the back of the palace to pour water. He saw several young monks sitting there crying, so he went up to ask why. The monks said that 2 monks went to ring the bell last night, but they only heard the bell ringing and no one came back. In 3 days, 6 monks were missing. Wukong guessed that it was a goblin who acted strangely. That night, he came to the temple of the Heavenly King and transformed into a little monk. After ringing the bell, he beat the wooden fish and sat down to chant sutras. He waited until midnight, and after a gust of wind blew, he smelled a strong aroma, then heard the sound of the ring, and then a beautiful woman walked into the hall. The woman hugged Wukong and wanted to take him to the back garden to have fun. Wukong followed her to the back garden. The woman stretched out her legs and tripped Wukong down. She shouted, "Darling brother," and stretched out her hands to pinch Wukong's neck. She opened her mouth and prepared to eat. Wukong crossed his hands, straightened his waist, jumped up, changed back to his original state, took out the golden cudgel and hit him on the head. When the monster saw that it was Wukong, he was not afraid. He took out his 2 swords and faced him. Not long after, the monster threw out the embroidered shoe on her left foot, turned into herself, and blocked Wukong, but she turned into a breeze and ran away. She broke into the abbot's house, grabbed Tang Monk and left. Wukong fought with the fake monster for a while, and after hitting it with a stick, he realized that it was an embroidered shoe. Knowing that he had fallen into the trap, he quickly went to see his master, but there was still his shadow there. Wukong was so angry that he picked up the stick and wanted to beat Bajie and Sha Seng. After daybreak, Wukong and the others returned to the Black Pine Forest and called out the mountain gods and earth gods to inquire. Only then did they learn that the monster lived in a bottomless cave in Xiangkong Mountain, thousands of miles away. So they took their horses, rode up on the clouds, and headed south. After a while, he saw a big mountain blocking the clouds, and Wukong asked Bajie to go down and investigate. Bajie jumped down and walked into the depths of the mountain. He saw 2 young women fetching water. He turned into a fat monk and walked up to inquire. The 2 women told him that on the order of the old lady, he came to pick some water. "Water, go back and arrange a banquet so that Tang Monk can eat well and get married in the evening." Bajie quickly went up the mountain to tell Wukong. Wukong immediately went down the mountain with Bajie and Sha Sang, followed the two women from a distance, and walked into the mountain. When they entered the mountain, they saw an archway with the words "Bottomless Cave" in the hollow mountain engraved on it. Sure enough, there was a naked man under the archway. Bajie looked down into the hole and saw that it was so deep that he couldn't see the bottom, and he couldn't help but feel scared. Wukong asked Bajie and Sha Monk to guard the entrance of the cave, and he jumped into the cave. It took him a long time to reach the bottom of the cave. He turned into a fly and flew in. He saw the banshee dressed more beautifully than before, and giving orders. The little monster prepared a feast to marry Tang Monk. When Wukong heard this, he quickly flew inward to find his master. After Wukong found Tang Monk, he said to him, "At the banquet later, you pour the wine quickly, and I will turn into a small insect and fly into the foam. Let the goblin drink it, kill her to death, and then we will leave." The two people just finished talking. The goblin came in. The goblin helped Tang Monk into the thatched pavilion, filled a glass of fine wine, and handed it to Tang Monk, saying that it was a drinking wine and he must drink it. Tang Monk saw that it was vegetarian wine made from grapes, and reluctantly drank it. He hurriedly filled up the wine again, and sure enough, he poured out a hop. Wukong lightly flew under the hop. Tang Monk immediately picked it up and handed it to the fairy. Unexpectedly, after the monster took the wine, he pulled Tang Monk and bowed twice before raising the glass. With this delay, the hops were long gone, revealing the bugs. The goblin flicked the insect outward with his little finger, and Wukong turned into an eagle, opened his huge claws, overturned the banquet table, and flew away without Tang Monk. At this time, Wukong had another plan. He flew out of the cave and told Bajie and Sha Sang to guard the entrance. He flew back into the cave, turned into a fly, came to Tang Sang and said, "Master, I saw something behind her. If you coax her to the peach tree in the garden, you can be saved." So Tang Monk asked someone to invite the goblin and asked her to go out with him to relax. The goblin agreed wholeheartedly, and walked into the garden with Tang Monk's arm. When he arrived at the peach tree, Wukong pinched Master's head and flew to the peach branch, turning into a big red peach. Tang Monk walked over, took it off, held it in his hand and gave it to the fairy to eat. The goblin happily took it and bit it. Unexpectedly, as soon as he opened his mouth, the peach rolled into his stomach before he could bite it. As soon as Wukong got into the goblin's belly, he changed back to his original form, kicking and beating her until her belly almost burst. The goblin was in unbearable pain and fell to the ground, shouting. The goblin had no choice but to ask the little monster to send Tang Sang out of the cave. Wukong shouted in his stomach, "Send my master out personally." The goblin had no choice but to struggle up, put Tang Sang on its back, and jumped hard to carry Tang Sang out of the cave. Sha Sang stepped forward and asked Tang Sang where his senior brother was. Tang Monk told him that it was in the goblin's belly. Wukong asked the demon to open his mouth, jumped out, took out the golden cudgel and hit the demon, and the demon also took out two swords and faced it. Seeing that they were fighting lively, Bajie took Sha Monk and jumped up into the clouds to help Wukong in the fight. The goblin was panicked at the sight, and repeated his old trick. He took off his embroidered shoes and turned into himself, thus escaping. When the goblin returned to the cave, he passed by the archway and saw Tang Monk sitting there alone. He stepped forward and hugged Tang Monk, then pulled his luggage and horses back to the cave together. Bajie knocked down the goblin with a rake, and saw that it was an embroidered shoe. Only then did the three of them realize that they had been tricked and quickly came back to find their master, who had already disappeared. Wukong entered the bottomless pit for the third time, picked up the iron rod, and opened the gatehouse, but could not find anyone inside. Suddenly, he smelled a fragrant aroma. Wukong looked for the aroma and went there. He saw a gold-lettered tablet in the back hall which read, "Honoring my father, the throne of King Li Tian," and a tablet next to it said, "Honoring my brother, Naja, the throne of the third prince." Wukong was filled with joy, picked up the tablet and the incense burner and walked out of the cave. Bajie and Sha Sang were very happy to see Wukong, thinking that they had rescued their master. Wukong smiled and said, "Hey, we don't need to save you. Just ask the important person on this tablet. That goblin must be the daughter of King Li Tian and the sister of the third prince. I'm going to heaven to ask for someone now." Wukong wrote the petition, took the tablet and the incense burner and rode the clouds to the upper realm, all the way to Lingxia Hall. After the Jade Emperor read the petition, he approved the original text as an edict and sent Tai Bai Jinxing to Zuanli Tianwang and his son to see him. Wukong also followed Jinxing to Yunlu Palace. After hearing the imperial edict, King Li Tian said angrily, "I have 3 sons and 1 daughter. My daughter Zhenying is only 7 years old this year. She is not sensible yet. How can she be a monster? This is a false accusation. Go get the monster rope and tie up this monkey. Come on." The giant spirits and gods swarmed up and tied Wukong up. The King of Heaven was still angry and took a knife to kill Wukong. Naja quickly grabbed the King of Heaven and said, "My father has forgotten that 300 years ago, the white-haired rat spirit stole the fragrant flowers and candles of Tathagata Buddha in Lingshan. We were ordered to catch her. We originally wanted to kill her, but Tathagata Buddha ordered let her go. Doesn't she worship the king as her father and the child as her brother, and set up a memorial tablet to worship her?" When King Li Tian heard this, he immediately woke up and personally untied Wukong and hurriedly bowed to apologize. Tai Bai Jinxing asked Li Tianwing and Naja to lead the heavenly soldiers and generals with Wukong to catch the goblin in the Sky Mountain, and then went back to follow up the order. The King of Heaven and Wukong soon arrived at Shenkong Mountain, and Bajie and Sha Monk hurriedly stepped forward to greet them. When the King of Heaven and Naja led the heavenly soldiers and generals into the bottomless pit, the goblin was forcing Tang Monk to get married in a small cave. When she saw the King of Heaven and Naja coming, she quickly knelt on the ground and begged for mercy. Naja took out the demon binding rope and tied the demon up, escorted him out of the cave and returned to heaven to await his fate. Tang Seng and his disciples packed up their luggage and continued on their way. Alright, this part of the story ends here.
Want to know what happened next? Let's listen to the breakdown next time.